Good afternoon, dear participants. Welcome again to our series of webinars. I am Hendra Gupta. I am from Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. Allow me to welcome you to the first webinar for South Asia, which is a collaborative framework, Asian Region Collaborative Framework to operationalize utility-based wastewater monitoring and management in support of increased investment to attain the SDG 631. This is the fourth series of webinars. Previously, we had webinars for Southeast Asia region, and we are focusing now for South Asia region. Though it's open for participants from Southeast Asia to join this webinar. So for the current webinars, we will talk about SDG 631 on data governance and policies for wastewater management. And this webinar is supported by UNHABITAT and also the AIT Global Water and Sanitation Center. We will have 4 speakers: Ms. Anunaya Banstola, Program Director, National Planning Commission from Kathmandu, Nepal. Also Dr. Rajit Oja, Section Chief of Department of Water Supply and Sewerage Management, Kathmandu, Nepal. We have also Mr. Disanayake, Senior Engineer for Water Reclamation, National Water Supply and Drainage Board in Sri Lanka, and Mr. Dorai Narayanan, former Head of Asset Management Division, where he will provide us insights, tips, and tricks about how to utilize SDG 631 in the current context of water utilities. So without any further ado, I will invite our moderator today, Professor Tamarat Kutatep, Professor of Environmental Engineering Management from the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand.
Hey, thank you very much, Hendra, for your kind introduction. So I'm very pleased to be here to moderate this session, in particular to these important issues on the data governance and policy for the wastewater management. I think this is one of the subject that we are lacking of implementation and also the applied in our countries, in particular to the South and Southeast Asia. I think today webinar we are talking about that the country experience the lesson learned that we have done in our region in South Asia, that we will be listening from those expert professionals from Nepal, from Sri Lanka, and also that the international expert from the Malaysia, Mr. Dorai Narayanan, that he would have the share experience from different countries that have been working with him for different projects, program, and he would be able to share many other things from the Malaysian point of views and others as well. I think this subject is quite important, that how do we governance, how do we control, how do we process the data and also the information that can link to the policy for the wastewater management. In particular to 6.3.1, I think our countries in South and Southeast Asia having not so good progress yet. So if it link into that the SDG indexes or the indicators that we are achieving, SDG 6.3.1 is one of behind the others. So that I think the initiative by UNHABITAT try to systematize the way, the methods, how we can report, how we can make use of those information, the monitoring data, and then systematically in to the national data information, so that we can learn many more from that. So I think without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Graham Alabaster. He is the Chief of the Sanitation and Waste Management from UNHABITAT, to give introduction of the UNSD questionnaire, and also that what are the way forwards that the UNHABITAT can help support, can help work together with our countries in the region. So please, Mr. Graham.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and delighted to be with all of you, and so glad that this meeting is taking place. Why is wastewater such a particularly important topic, and why did Habitat get involved? Well, as the the custodian in the UN system for sustainable urbanization, of course, one of the biggest impacts as cities of all sizes grow is their use of fresh water and their production of wastewater. For many, many years, we rely on the joint monitoring program of WHO and UNICEF as a way to monitor access to water and sanitation services. But this work, although incredibly useful, only talks about access to services. So it talks about access of people to the provision of water and sanitation. But as the world becomes more urban, and in fact, by 2050, 3/4 of the planet will live in an urban agglomeration of any kind, the issue of wastewater has become increasingly important. For one reason, of course, it's causing untold damage to our environment, not just through depletion of oxygen in receiving waters and in organic matter, but also more recently, and as development moves forward, with toxic substances, which are finding their way into the food chain and having a negative impact on people's health. It's for this reason, when the SDG 6 for water was being developed by the member states, that we, with some other agencies, made a play to ensure that wastewater is an integral part of the monitoring of the overall water goal. The responsibility for this indicator rests with WHO, UNHABITAT, and UNDESA, and we have come up with a way to help and assist governments to monitor this more effectively. Aside from having an understanding of where we are at a global level as a global monitoring instrument, of course, wastewater and its impacts can also have a profound impact locally. And it's for this reason that when we go down to subnational monitoring, understanding of who is producing wastewater, how it's treated, and of course, most importantly, the follow-up investments needed to ensure that we protect people and the planet from future pollution, basically now have an indicator. This indicator, for the first time, reflects all sources of wastewater, not just those produced from domestic situations. And as is very important in your region, the non-domestic proportion of wastewater has just as much importance, if not more, than the domestic proportion of wastewater. So we've broadened the number of partners. We've tried to broaden the number of partners who are involved in monitoring, and we see it essential as subnational institutions, water and sanitation utilities become involved and use a lot of their administrative data to help us construct more effective values for wastewater production and treatment. There are, of course, many recent developments which mean that wastewater is extremely important. One of them is its use in tracking diseases, so wastewater-based epidemiology, which we will see an increasing attention to. But perhaps, of course, the most important thing is the impact of climate change and how both from extreme climate events, we're finding that wastewater treatment systems, of course, are inundated, and also the use of treated wastewater to augment freshwater supply in regions of scarcity. So without further ado, this is one of a series of webinars being held globally, but in the different regions, to better understand the monitoring needs and to help us make better estimates of the investments needed to tackle this extremely important issue of wastewater. So we're looking forward to supporting you in this work as UNHABITAT. We look forward to the discussions and deliberations today, and please feel free to contact us should you wish to learn anything more about the work we do on wastewater. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Graham, that introduced the importance, the needs, how we should be aware of that. The monitoring data, monitoring information should be systematically reported, and then we can imply those information further. But before we go into details of these experience from the countries, so perhaps I would like to invite Mr. Florian of the UNHABITAT to talk about, to introduce about the questionnaire of the UNSD 6.3.1. What does it mean and how we should apply that in country? So Florian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning from Geneva, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Tamrat, for the introduction, and Andra and Graham. I saw that few people were introducing themselves on the chat, which is nice. And do not hesitate also if you have any question. Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can see it nicely here.
Okay. So I will introduce the methodology that we use to report on the 631 indicator. Based on, we are using the UNSD UNEP environmental questionnaire for non-Eurostat and OECD members. So this is the definition of the SDG target on the right, and the definition of the, on the left, by 2030 of the target 6.3, sorry, on the left. By 2030, improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping, and minimizing the release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse. And there are two indicators which aims to monitor this target: 631 on the proportion of wastewater safely treated, and 632 on the proportion of bodies with good ambient water quality, which is monitored by UNEP. So for 631, there are three custodian agencies. UNHABITAT is focusing on the total and industrial wastewater statistic, using the methodology, as I said, developed by UNSD, and almost similar one, which is used by for Eurostat country and OECD country. And these official statistics are supplied by national statistic offices and our Ministry of Environment or equivalent institution. It can be sometimes the Ministry of Water or Public Work, or the regulator, which is monitoring water uses. And in parallel, WHO is providing estimates on household wastewater on the domestic part. Here it's a representation of the methodology used to monitor the indicator, which is only related to point sources. So the flow of wastewaters are generated, are disaggregated by sources on the left. It also includes wastewater flow from independent collecting systems, such as septic tank, that are transported to a treatment plant for safe treatment, as is illustrated by a truck here. Some of the wastewater is discharged to the environment without any treatment, of course, and sewer also collect an important part of runoff water. So the variable on the left used for the generation of wastewater from the questionnaire, which is shown on the right here, the UNSD questionnaire. So the industrial fraction is disaggregated by economic activities using the International Standard Industrial Classification of All Economic Activity, ISIC codes, for mining and quarrying, manufacturing, electricity, but excluding cooling water, construction, other economic activities, which are services like hotels, shops, etc., restaurant, institution, and household. On the right are reported the variable used for the treatment of wastewater. The other treatment plants include industries, which have their own treatment facility, and the independent treatment facility are the ones that are not connected to a treatment plant, a collection to a wastewater collection system, and it includes septic tank. And each time you can see the breakdown for the three levels of treatment, and we consider that safely treated is related to at least secondary treatment in absence of compliance monitoring, in fact. Of course, country generally use compliance, but in this methodology, this questionnaire don't consider compliance. So the results of this monitoring, which has been published in 2021, and looking at the 2015 data, because that was the beginning of this 2030 agenda, and also it was the highest populous year for the UNSD database. But you can see that there was not so many countries. It includes the UNSD and OECD database here, but it's only there are only 56 countries that reported some data in 2015 on wastewater flow generated. And this is a logarithmic scale because, of course, it's very different. And the volume, which is 132 billion cubic meter, it's in fact very low. And this is a disaggregation for some of these countries, for the European members. And I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can see that some countries are not reporting on most variable, and there are more blue, which correspond to domestic water supply and therefore to utility data. And that's also why UNHABITAT, since 2 years, is really trying to involve utility data. This figure presents the volume treated from 57 countries who reported in 2015. The volume is also very low. And just show you now the same disaggregation, because you see, you may remember the questionnaire, the same variable, but you can see again high heterogeneity in the variable and more data from urban wastewater treatment plant, which are in blue, and very few from manufacturing industry, which are in brown here. And finally, the indicator, which is the proportion of wastewater safely treated. So there are less countries than on the previous slide because you need to report on generation and treatment to do the ratio. Here you can see also some countries where had higher ratios than 100% because of an improved monitoring, but also because some runoff water is collected and also some wastewater generated from non-public drinking water, which can extract the water from rivers or lake or groundwater, and also some cooling water can be collected and transported to treatment plants. And among the 42 countries reporting on both treatment and generation, 1/3 receive at least some treatment, and the proportion of safely treated was only possible to calculate for the country reporting to UNSD, because at that time, Eurostat and OECD database did not have these parameters, but they included for the next round of data collection. And for the 14 countries only that report on wastewater, industrial wastewater generation and treatment, 1/3 also of the flow receives some treatment, and only 3 countries from UNSD reported. So I will go quickly on the next one. And this one is just showing that on the gray and the aggregate axis on the right, that's we only covered for total wastewater generation and treatment 20% of the population, and for industrial wastewater treated 4% of the population, which is very low. So we lack there are insufficient data yet to provide regional and global estimate on this indicator. This one from Switzerland is showing the arrow here that the self-abstracted water from business and industry is not in general not included in the official statistic, which are generally only focused on public sewer. So this is also part of the difficulty to get such data, especially for the private sector. And this one from Mexico is showing that also municipal and non-municipal water uses, generation and treatment on the left are almost equivalent. As Graham said before, the quality is different. And you can see that much more BOD, which is related to the organic concentration of organic matter in the discharge wastewater. So much more BOD is generated and discharged from non-municipal sources and from municipal sources. And you may remember that I showed before that to date, much of the data come from municipal sources. So we may miss this part from industries. The last one from the load of BOD by economic activity from Costa Rica is just showing that in fact the evacuation of wastewater and sludge is not the only again the main sources of BOD, but you can see that other economic activity and even if you skip the agriculture, which is responsible for diffuse sources of pollution that are not taken in account into this methodology, which is only focusing on point sources, but you can see that, for instance, the production of food produced by industry is releasing more BOD than a wastewater treatment plant. So to conclude, there are only 42 countries which reported statistics on wastewater generation and treatment in 2015, suggesting that about a third of total and industrial wastewater receives some treatment before discharge. And I invite you to go on the SDG water portal where all the indicator data are reported. And this is, you can generate map by geographic area or world map like this, showing the countries that reported some wastewater flow treated for total and for industrial. And you can see a very, very low data from the ASEAN region. So that's also one of the purpose of this monitoring and of this series of webinars that we previously conducted in Latin America, Africa, Arab states, and Caribbean to encourage countries to monitor. And I invite you also to if you want some further detail on the methodology, on the data, and on the UNSD and the SDGs data portal that I mentioned, and all the figures are from this report that I mentioned that was published in 2021, and they are all explained as well as our methodology. Thank you very much. Wishing you a very good webinar. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Florian.
Yes.
So for your kind introduction of these questionnaires and also the result of how should we use this kind of monitoring information to reflect to those interventions or the policies or other investment in the futures that we need to prioritize that several areas of the wastewater, the industry, the agriculture or the domestic wastewater. There are so many differences in between, so that we need to quantify that what would be the loadings, how we can strategize that, which investment is good for our country in particular. And also this, I think one of the key lessons learned on our experience that not a small country, but one of the highest country in the Himalayan mountains, that Ms. Anunaya Banstola will give a presentation on the experience and the current data monitoring for water and wastewater in Nepal, which is very important. She is the program director of the National Planning Commission from Kathmandu, from Nepal. So Anunaya, the floor is yours, please. Namaste. We cannot hear you yet. We cannot hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes. Right now, please go ahead.
Give me 1 minute to share the slide. I am not quite good in this technology. Is this Zoom?
There's a button to share content. You see that?
Here in Zoom meeting,
Hmm?
share screen.
Yeah.
Share screen. So can you see it now?
Not yet.
No, not yet. is it?
Okay, we can see the screen.
Okay. Okay, now, thank you.
Yeah, can you put into the presentation mode?
Sure.
Yeah,
So,
great.
so I'm namaste to all. I'm from National Planning Commission, and I'm going to share my experience. Actually, it is not a presentation, it is sharing my knowledge and just experience on this waste management treatment in Nepal. We have many policies. First, I want to tell something about my organization. It is National Planning Commission of Nepal. It is apex advisory body of government of Nepal, and it formulates national vision, development policies, periodic plans, sectoral development plans. Similarly, it is main agency for monitoring and evaluation of the development programs. It also identifies source of budgeting and prepare the MTF guidelines for annual programs also. And in the new constitution, we went to the structural state restructuring program. That means we turn into the federal system where we have local, provincial, and federal governments. So NPC is the main body that coordinates between the planning and programs between these three tiers of government. So when we talk about the SDG, the role of National Planning Commission is very important in total implementation of SDG's goal, especially the fourth plan, especially since fourth periodic plan, our development goals, our annual budgeting and programmings are aligned with the SDGs indicators, and fifth plan is fully aligned with the SDGs code also. And so you can say that NPC is main body for SDGs implementation and as well as the SDGs localization also. So these three, in this all three level, we are trying to localize, that means incorporation of the SDG indicator is for the local level, need of the local levels. So that is SDGs localization framework. And for that, there are high level committees, some are chaired by Honorable Prime Minister, and some are chaired by Vice Chairman of NPC, and other NPC honorable members who lead the 7 thematic committees. And one of the thematic group is the water and sanitation also. So I just mentioned, just write down the SDG target. And if you go to the SDG target 6.3, I'm hesitant to say that we haven't get much update on this SDG targets as we have aspirated for that, for the achievement. The wastewater, the proportion of wastewater, I just mentioned the target here for the proportion of untreated industrial wastewater to decrease from 99 to 57.5 in 2022, but the target is not achieved, and by this time, by this year, only approximately 5% water was increased. I mean, treated water is increased. That means is still 95% of untreated industrial water is gone untreated, and is in that also in the river bodies. And because we lag in this SDG 6.3.1, we couldn't get the other achievement also. Actually, for 6.3.2, we couldn't even set the target for the baseline for the year 2015. Oh yeah, SDG implementation here. Where is that? This slide is something wrong with this slide. I think sorry for this. I think I share the another slide. Policies in water and sanitation. Okay, let me see it. See. Sorry for the technical error. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. Please go ahead.
So let's jump on the another slide. It is policies and water and sanitation. I have just enumerated some of the policies and guidelines on this sanitation and wastewater treatment, water supply, every sectors. In Nepal, in the wastewater treatment comes under the umbrella of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So altogether, we said just it was. In Constitution of Nepal, it says that every citizen have the right to access to basic cleaning, drinking water, and sanitation. In national plan, the current plan is 15th national plan. The running national plan is 15th. So it says that water and sanitation is a major social sectors, and the targets of this water and sanitation services are aligned on the SDG goals. In SDG goals also, we basically focus in SDG goal 6.36 also, we basically focus on water supply and sanitation and hygiene, and we can say we are more focused to the household waste management, and then also household solid waste management. Maybe that reason we couldn't focus more on the industrial sector. We were struggling to the basic sanitation services, so we went for the ODF declaration, something program like that. And then there is our national water supply, sanitation and hygiene sector development plan, and national solid waste management policy, drinking water rules, Environmental Protection Act, and national environmental policy, integrated national water resource policy. And recently, new Water and Sanitation Act is promulgated in the last September. And national standards on water quality was also revised and implemented. And though it is less important things, maybe less important thing to other participants, but for us, this wastewater treatment plant is started functioning, and that is also great achievement for us now. This is the implementation monitoring framework. Here I want to show you the national data profile system, especially meant for data generation or data keeping for SDG implementation and record keeping. You can say it is for monitoring of SDG development. It provides a platform where all information are kept in one system in the National Bureau of Statistics, which was under National Planning Commission few months before. Now it is under Minister of Prime Minister, Office of Prime Minister. So this national data profile provides a platform where all types of data will be incorporated. Here you can see that we can filter the data collected from the local level, province level, and national level also. And for that you need to select, like for example, if you select SDG target and goal 6 and target also, you can pinpoint the target also, and then you need to click on got it. But right now I don't want to show it because we are lacking in the data entry, because our data entry point is from the local level and province level, and if they didn't put in data on this system, we will not get anything. But you can say it is a first step for making a holistic integrated data management model. But you can see it is not ill-mouthing, but we don't have enough data. You can see they are blank, we don't get any data on this. There is the water management mechanism It is made from the Nepal Water Supply Sanitation Hygiene Sector Development Plan, and is illustration for the waste management mechanism. You can see that Federal Waste Ministry is here. Now we have Ministry of Water Supply. So this is Federal Waste Ministry, and then under this we will got the waste sector and Department of Wastewater Treatment, Waste Sanitation, and the other under that there will be central project, and there will be some project on the provincial level, and Ministry of Looking Waste will be main sectoral agency for that implementation. And similarly, in district level, there will be right now there are the WAS coordination committee is there, and they will coordinate with the municipality or rural municipalities or urban municipalities, and there will be another sectors that will be collaborating with the development program. So there will be NGOs or private sectors or community or any international supporting agencies. So there will be policy planning, execution, regulation of waste sectors. And in provincial level, there will be a planning, execution of waste infrastructure. And in district level, there will be major implementation and major repairs of infrastructure. And in local level, there will be planning and implementation of a small system and quality and management, quality control management, and minor repairs of the waste system. So this is the total progress. If you can summarize the total progress we have from this baseline indicators. The indicators were basic level water supply, high and medium level water supply, basic level sanitation supply, and sewage system with the treatment. So you can see that you can see other data, but the interesting thing is we only have 2.1% sewage system with treatment. In the target 2022 was 3%, but we have only achieved 2.1% till 2021. Our target for 2020, fifth national plan targets for 2000 till 2020, we will get 22%, which now it seems impossible. Okay, let me say it is impossible. It looks like impossible. In SDG goals, there is very high target. We have put very high target, but still we are unable to move further. I mean, we need a very rapid pace for get these SDG targets. And right now, we are lacking databases also, and lack of the data, and lack of actual need and the actual demand of the local level. It is difficult to plan according to the our development needs also. It is wastewater management in urban areas. It is just calculation. I have found it in another report. Here you can see that domestic wastewater generation is 867, and it goes to the treated wastewater is only 21.1 mld, and in the diverse only 2.8 mld. So you can see that in the whole overall wastewater treatment system, we can see only you can see that only 7% is gone to the wastewater treatment, like the wastewater treatment plant. So we are still lagging. I mean, you can enumerate very difficulties or inabilities or some lacking of the resources, something like that. But first of all, there are some we are lagging some technical resources, technologies, manpower, etc. Look, I have enumerated our problem here. It is poor planning. I don't mean that the planner are not capable, but data generation and quality of data is always our issue. And we have inadequate technology, funding, and numeracies. For example, like we are dumping the waste on the landfill, or we're just throwing there. So the technology we are using are very primitive ones sometimes. Just I have mentioned in the previous slide, we are now having that we have one activated sludge treatment plant. So that the integrated technology and funding also, and human resource also. So engagement of private sector is also an issue, especially for acquiring the required land for the waste treatment plant. And coordination between multiple stakeholders also is important. For example, government and private sector coordination, or coordination between 3 tier of government: local, federal, and provincial level. And there is another challenge, that is poor waste disposal habit of the people. And supply-based planning is also poor, because the ultimate users has poor sensitization about the waste, about the health issue, or about the consequence of the field, like that. The hazard that will be produced by this unmanaged waste is we need to sensitize people about that. So, and sustainability of waste utilities is also very important, very challenging, because we have 5 treatment plant in Kathmandu and only 1 is working now. So others under repair are not working. So that indicates that our waste utilities are not sustainable. So if we get the other thing also, then still there will be some consideration, like if we make a data system or data management system based on ICT, then again there will be problem of the data complexity. That means who will want the data, who has financed the data, how to interpret the preliminary data, how to get the conclusion, like that. And also the appropriate method of data collection. I mean, who is going to research, how much money is allocated for the research, and what is the capacity or the competency of the researcher or data collector will also affect the credibility of the data. And data control is also important, validation of data and making it available to the people. And then the national security is also will come into the issue, because if we make the system based only on the ICT, then maybe we don't have the enough competence or enough capacities to control it or manage it, so that you can use safely it for the decision making process. Sorry, there is no thank you slide, so I thank you very much. I think it is done. I'm still confused if I present a wrong slide. But sorry, and thank you for your patience.
Dhanyawad. Thank you very much, Madam Adunaya. That's showing your experience, and also that the case that very importantly you have said about that the importance of this kind of evidence that can form the proper policies or the interventions in your country, that whether we should invest on the centralized or decentralized, or a system that for industry or other activities that generate the wastewater. I think that's a very important part that you can showcase to us, that this is very important. And of course, there are so many issues in the future, or even right now, we are struggling with that, who invest and who will properly interpret this kind of information for other purposes, for other investment. I think that would be interesting. So that linked to this, the other presentation by Dr. Rajit Osha. So I think he is a section chief from the Department of Water Supply and Sewerage Management from Kathmandu, Nepal as well. He will be the one that informed the SDG data management and monitoring, contributing to the achievement of SDG 6.3.1 in Nepal. So, Dr. Rajit, the floor is yours, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah. You can share your presentation if you. Okay, great.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's visible, but you can do the presentation mode. Yeah, please.
Is it in presentation mode now?
Yeah, that's clear.
Okay. Good afternoon. So today, I'm going to present SDGs data governance in Nepal. I'm going to present the case of 6.1 water supply and 6.2 sanitation to assess the 6.3 gaps. So right now what we are doing from our MIS is we are trying to track the data of 6.1 and 6.2. So I will just use it as the case to talk to you about the 6.3 gaps. So basically, the Constitution of Nepal has given the central data management provision to central government. But the problem now is most of the data are collected from local government level. Means local government are the data creators. So whatever data we are going to use is, we are the aggregators of those data only. From the federal government is only the aggregator of those data, but the data are created by local government. So when we try to collect the data, we saw three kind of possible gaps inside the local governments. The first one was they don't have the information. So one kind of standardized information system need to be in place in all local governments so that they could be able to get the information on SDGs. So this has come under the SDG localization. And then based upon those information, local governments should be able to identify how much investment will be required to achieve the sustainable development goals. In this case, we have already identified, we have already made the system for 6.1 and 6.2, but that system need to be replicated in 6.3 as well. And then the local government need to identify whether they have institutional capacity enough to sustain those data updates and sustain those to achieve that goal. So the system should be something like it could cover all these three gaps. So based on that, we developed the resource planning system also. The system itself does the management of information also, and also helps to plan in terms of resources for the local governments to reach the safely managed water supply services and sanitation services. Basically, the three I was talking about, the information has been collected through the data collection applications. These are geo-enabled system data, which are structural and non-structural both, management-related data also. That goes into the server through the mobile apps. And then those server will decide what kind of municipal wash plan need to be made in the planning module of that system. And that will decide the investment requirement of that 6.1 and 6.2. And based upon that, the financing module is also decide how we can bridge the gap of the financing of SDG 6.1 in terms of water supply and 6.2 in terms of sanitation. And then we identify the wash governance mechanism of that local government to know what kind of capacity we need to give to the local government to achieve these indicators, to achieve these goals of sustainable development goal. So that falls under the institutional capacity, the third I that I was talking about. This is how it is happening in SDG 6.1 and 6.2. So we collected the information on water supply inventories. The georeferencing has been used, and these georeference can be used for asset management in upcoming days. Similarly, we try to identify where are the people from leaving no one behind perspective. We try to identify where are the persons who are not getting the water supplies. The tracking of unreached has become easier because of this system. Similarly, the historical data sets of water quality are also exported inside the systems. And also we are collecting the water quality related information of different utilities through this georeference management information system. So, and we are also trying to determine where the utility stands in terms of level and quality of water supply service, and also operation and management efficiency. The level and quality of water supply service will decide how much capital investment will be required in that utility to reach their 100% goal in SDGs. And operation and management efficiency will decide whether the process indicators of those water utilities are okay or not in terms of operation and management. We can look at the asset management, we can look at their accountings, we can look at the non-revenue water in this kind of indicators. So this has been initiated in water supply utilities to help them to reach the sustainable development goals. And this will also help them to make their own business plan to reach the sustainable development goals. Until now, we have collected more than 14,000 water supply systems, which covers 5 million approximately population. More than 572,000 taps related information are there. Household sanitation is also there. Approximate 1 million population's household sanitation data is collected. Similarly, in community sanitation, where we are collecting the information of fecal sludge management and wastewater treatment units. The public toilets data is also collected. The unserved population who are unserved from water supply schemes are collected. Washing schools and healthcare facility are also collected. This is totally in line with the UN indicators suggested from Joint Monitoring Program indicators of 6.1 and 6.2. So, as I mentioned before, this will help the local government to analyze their status in terms of 6.1 and 6.2. Out of 753 local governments, the data is up to date for now 180 municipalities. So this is the work on progress, which will help us to identify what kind of services are people getting in terms of local governments indicators. This is one of the local governments example to show you how we are analyzing the data. So after we get this data, we try to see how much of the investment will be required to achieve the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals 6.1 and 6.2. You can see these are reflected in terms of capital investment, in terms of capital maintenance expenditures, in terms of operational expenditure and direct support such as capacity building and pre-feasibility studies and detailed project report preparation. And also it gives you the estimated cost in terms of how much it will be required in terms of water supply services, in terms of sanitation services, in terms of schools, in terms of healthcare facility and public places. So this will help the local government to identify the policy hurdles, the data and the gaps that needs to be assessed. This is the example of Karjana municipality, Sira, which showed more than 220 million Nepalese rupees will be required to achieve SDG 6.1 and 6.2 in that local municipality. So why 6.3 is not captured till now and what are the challenges? So now I'm going to present, I showed you how 6.1 and 6.2 is done. And now I will show you why 6.3 is not captured and what are the challenges. So the goal 6.3 talks about improvement of water quality, pollution, eliminating dumping and minimizing release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially encouraging recycling and safe reuse. So the red literature shows you the milestone that we want to achieve, and the blue one tries to show you the output that we want to create, and the black one shows you the outcome of inside this goal, milestone, output, and outcome, all three are fitted. So first thing to do that, we need to start with the mapping that we started doing from 6.1 and 6.2. As we can see clearly, it is under the responsibility of Ministry of Water Supply. But when we try to map the groundwater aquifers and river health, then the responsibility has been clearly shared inside our ministerial area. So we don't know whose responsibility is to map the groundwater aquifers or river health. Similarly, it has the linkages of 6.2. It has the linkages. 6.3 has the linkage with the 6.2. As you go to the sanitation value chain, you can see the reuse and safe disposal directly contributes to the 6.3. So we have to know the utilities performance and we have to know how the utilities are behaving. So the key performance indicators of utilities also need to be developed in terms of output indicators and in terms of process indicators. So these are not yet developed in our case. Which is reflected here also, because when we talk about the talking about the indicators, that we need to look after all indicators such as non-point sources and then wastewater generation also. So it directly reflects into the Agriculture Ministry and then the Ministry of Water Supply, then Ministry of Forest and Environment. So there are like a lot of sectoral stakeholders which can provide the data, but as you know, everybody's responsibility is no one's responsibility. So the responsible agency need to be selected clearly to have this kind of clear database. Also, when we started the development of indicators, we were talking about untreated industrial wastewater reduced to 10% and proportion of bodies with good ambient water quality, and that milestone is yet to be decided. So the milestone need to be clear to measure it. Since from National Planning Commission's perspective, the milestone is not clear from this side. We first need to make the milestone clear in terms of proportion of bodies with good ambient water quality. Here I have reflected that one. It's so Central Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Industry, and Ministry of Water Supply and Sanitation are the responsible agencies. For industrial survey, if you look at those data from CBS are there, but not properly aligned with the 6.3 indicators. Similarly, Ministry of Industry and its capacity of the lab facilities is also yet to be decided. The boundary condition of industrial treatment, and then after it is treated in industries, it goes to municipal treatment. So it needs to be decided who is going to check where. And role of Ministry of Forest and Environment also need to be made clearer, whether it is the surveillance agency only, or it is the regulating agency, or who will be the prime responsible agency for the collection of the data. And since the proportion of bodies of water with good ambient water quality has been given the responsibility, Ministry of Water Supply and Sewerage Management has been given the responsibility, that needs to be reflected in the programs that are being generated in terms of SDGs. That river health improvement programs and groundwater improvement programs also need to be reflected inside these programs. So finally, I want to close my slide with the same things that the gap are seen in 6.3 as they were in 6.1 and 6.2 in local governments in terms of clarity of roles. We need to identify the information sources. We need to identify the investment sources, and we need to identify the institutional capacity related thing to talk more about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Muri Danjawat. So I think that is very clear that this is very important. We need to gather more information and then translate that the investment plan into the policies, into many interventions that the lesson learned experience in Nepal showing very clearly that it is very important to have a proper data management. Then we can strategize that what should be the improvement, the development of the country, in particular to the water and wastewater sectors, including the sanitation as well. So I think we have about 5 to 10 minutes to have a clarification or Q&A session for these three session in between from the UNHABITAT, from the National Planning Commission, and from the Department of Water Supply and Sewerage Management. So any questions, comments? Nope, not really. I just see the chat requesting for the presentations. I'm sure that the UNHABITAT will be very pleased to share all the presentations to the audience. And of course, I would request Madam Anundaya and Dr. Rajit to share the presentation to us so that we can share to the audience as well.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I would like to encourage, of course, the audience to speak. I see maybe someone will speak, but just to thank these two presenters. It was very nice. I mean, we can understand a lot of research that was done to try to capture and to map this, as it was said, very different stakeholders, very different sectors, and it's a governance issue, and especially in a federal states where you have all these different level of administration, and it's nice to see the people need to understand that, need this research. But I was also relatively and another thing is that during so many years, people have been focusing on the access to sanitation and water supply, of course, because people need and want water. They are not so concerned about the treatment of this wastewater. And also, it was also because there was really an international focus on that, looking at the millennial, the MDG, and what WHO and UNICEF was doing. So it's quite a recent change in mind to really want to focus on wastewater, which is water. And I was yes, surprised to see that some data exist in Nepal. So if there is any chance to report them on the SDG indicator, even if it's not capturing the entire country, the entire rural area, which may not be responsible for so much severe wastewater production. The flow diagram was really nice, and this is something also that it's a nice approach. This water flow diagram, they are inspired from the sheet flow diagram, but to use them to map water flow are really important. But I saw some numbers, so we'd like to encourage Nepal to report on UNSD, even if the data are partial. I mean, many countries are sometimes just reporting country from 1 or 2 cities. You know, it's not all the nationwide that need to be captured. Sometimes it's just the household, but I saw also that there are some data on industry. So depending if they want to report it or not, of course, it's only the country who is deciding what is reported or not. But even if the wastewater is not treated, this is something that can be reported as generated. So again, just to thank you very much for these 2 presentations. And if we have any chance to do some discussion later on bilaterally, that would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Florian. Madam Anunaya, do you have any reflection on that?
Yeah, okay,
Please.
Thank you for a comment. Actually, I agree with the speaker that the data generation system is, you know, that it just maybe made by 1 or 2 sitting, or in just concentrate in one research paper or one survey or something like that. We have to do so many things yet to get all the integrated data that represent the whole national status. So that is our problem. And another problem is, maybe one other problem why we are lagging in data generation is, just when we approve this SDG goal and indicators, we have to suffer from the earthquake. So there was lag in the plan and activities are all programmed, they were halted. And then we have constitution, new constitution, and went to the state restructuring program. So whose responsibility is where, and who is doing what job was so much confused. And then again, and after that restructuring program, then we have COVID and something like that. So maybe because of this changing situations and unexpected scenarios, maybe we didn't progress much as we have aspirated when we were targeting the SDG indicators. That is one problem. And the another is, maybe we have made the WAS activities high level business. You know, we didn't reach to the local level. They don't know why they need that waste disposal plant, or why they need to segregate the waste, or why they need to do the proper waste disposal mechanism, why they need that. They don't know. And we fail to sensitize those people also. Or we can say we fail to participate them in the program rephrasing phase. So maybe that one of that reason. The other is, we still are in dilemma that whose responsibility is what in terms of this federal system. So the constitution has assigned both local levels and federal level, both for the responsible for this wastewater treatment or overall sanitation. So in general, federal is liable for making policies, but for implementation we have to guide, we have to make the local government to act on the programs. And there is still the coordination is lagging in short terms, you can say. And then other is the data generation process, then who is generating data, why to generate, what should be the indicator. So there should be more discussion on those things. That the questionnaire that Sujit sir sent to us was so detailed, so vast that we have to struggle to find the data to put the Excel sheet. So put on the Excel sheet. It's very difficult, and maybe we need to do more on that, I think.
Yeah, that we fully understand that this is quite a challenging things to do, that we cannot really well coordinate between the several departments, ministry or authorities that controlling or generating the data. So I think that that's quite important. But of course, I think in the view of the UN habitats, we may need to define who should be the focal points that we can discuss with any authorities or agencies that linking to this SDG 6.3.1. Perhaps Madam Alundaya from National Planning Commissions could be a focal point or not. Okay, we can discuss that.
Sorry, I will take one time. I'm happy to participate to any discussion, but we have another dedicated branch or dedicated section for SDG implementation process.
I see.
So I think I need to talk with them first. So
okay, that's
I cannot
okay.
be sure. Yeah, but I'm as a employee in NPC. I'm ready to take part in any discussion. But to finalize anything, maybe we need to consult the SDG implementation section in NPC.
That could be very nice. That could be very nice. So I think that in your country, Nepal, you have done many nice things on the sanitation dashboard with the support of the Gates Foundation, as I have heard. So I think at least 6.2, you have been progressing quite well. Then later, we can use the same kind of dashboard approach for the 6.3.1. But of course, we need more coordinating works with many agencies from industry, from agriculture, and from other sectors as well, that who will generate the report, who will generate the information that into the report. So I think that's quite the challenge. So I think we can end this section by these remarks. But anyway, we have the another case study from Sri Lanka that Mr. Nisnayake, the senior engineer, water reclamation from the National Water Supply and Drainage Board, Sri Lanka, will give an experience that the exercise using the UNSD questionnaire for SDG 6.3.1, what happened and how have been the country or the agencies working on this so far. So this Nayake, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So please.
Yeah. Wait, I'll put this in presentation. Okay. Hope everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm Tilna Disanayake from National Water Supply and Drainage Board of Sri Lanka. I would like to express my views and in exercising UNSD questionnaire for SDG 6.3.1 in Sri Lanka's context. Actually, as you know, as you've heard, SDG plays an important role in monitoring the development of countries. But unfortunately, at the moment, Sri Lanka is in a bad position with the ongoing financial crisis. Actually, all of the world is now feeling that. But anyway, according to SDG report, the SDG index rank of Sri Lanka is at 76. And as you can see, there are a lot of reds. But today, our main target is on clean water and sanitation. but unfortunately, according to the statistics, there are major challenges remaining for Sri Lanka. And for this segment 6, and as you can see, 3 out of 5 parameters for SDG 6 don't have sufficient data to analyze the trends to check where we are heading. And for those categories, there are major challenges remain. So this is a big problem. And specifically for anthropogenic wastewater, or the wastewater originated due to human usage that receive treatment, we don't have sufficient data. So I believe it is really important to get this data and analyze where we are leading and where we are heading, and to adjust and make up plans accordingly to achieve the SDG goals in the future. So, and I think many of you might have about GLASS. According to this, GLASS means United Nations Global Analysis and Achievement of Sanitation and Drinking Water. In here also, if you check there, Sri Lanka doesn't have proper and sufficient data with regards to wastewater management. Actually, we have some data on the water and pipe-borne water, what is the percentage, but regarding wastewater, we don't have sufficient data there also. So by considering all of these, a sanitation master plan was developed in Sri Lanka to identify the priority sanitation solutions and optimize the investments to achieve safe sanitation coverage in Sri Lanka with an incremental approach. This master plan was launched in 2019, and this master plan was specifically prepared to meet the SDG 6 target 6.2 and 6.3, and to enhance the safe sanitation of Sri Lanka from 11.3% to 29% by 2025, and to increase it up to 53% by 2050. And apart from that, as in Kathmandu, as it was mentioned, in Sri Lanka also there are a lot of organizations advocating and engaging for the sanitation sector. So another main intention was of the sanitation master plan is to build a correlation between different organizations like National Water Supply Drainage Board, Central Environmental Authority, Irrigation Department, and to get a correlation between all these organizations to achieve the set goals, so that we can all work together to achieve this in a simultaneous way. So in the Sri Lankan context, I mean, this is the context, this is global context. I think it will, we can apply for any country. There are 4 main categories with regards to sanitation: on-site sanitation, centralized city sewage, fecal sludge treatment plants, and decentralized wastewater treatment plants. So when in this context, the sanitation coverage of Sri Lanka, according to 2020 statistics, Sri Lanka, 2.1% of the population of Sri Lanka is covered with sewer systems or pipe sewer connection, and others have on-site sanitation systems. But from this 91.5%, only 11.1 has safe sanitation options with regular desludging of septic tanks, and where the septage is treated properly in fecal sludge management plants. The rest of the septage mostly connected by the vacuum trucks are discharged in open environment or in natural water bodies. So this has been a real problem in Sri Lanka. So in Sri Lanka, only few major cities are covered with centralized sewer systems. Basically, we have 14 sewerage schemes in Sri Lanka. So when considering about in the population wise, the capital of Sri Lanka contributes to 1.5% of the sewer network coverage, and the rest only covers about only 0.5%. So as you can see, so the sewer network distribution is very less in the country. And this is the breakdown of the capacities and the population served from this sewerage scheme. And here you can see the Colombo city, the capital of Sri Lanka, has the largest sewer coverage and the percent of population coverage. But although this is the scenario, the network of Colombo city is about more than 100 years old, and even the wastewater in Colombo city is mostly, I think more than 90% of the wastewater only have a primary treatment, and it is pumped into the sea with an sea outfall. So with this regards, actually with the sanitation master plan, it is planned to construct 14 new sewerage schemes in Sri Lanka to increase at least the sanitation coverage of pipe sewer up to 5%. So at the moment, there are some ongoing projects island-wide, and there are some planned projects. Apart from that, we have identified key areas like near the riverbanks, where near to the water intakes, to implement sewerage network so that the wastewater from the city and domestic and commercial utilities doesn't go to the rivers. They'll be collected and treated in centralized wastewater treatment plants. So at the moment, we are facing huge problems with the financial status of the country. So with the ongoing financial crisis, it is currently impossible to construct sewerage networks to cover every small city. I think it is understood everywhere. So thus, now our main plan with the sanitation master plan is to increase the safe sanitation coverage by constructing and rehabilitating the fecal sludge management plants. So actually, this has been our main consideration at the moment, because constructing sewerage network is very difficult and very costly at the moment. So this is the baseline of septic treatment plants. Originally, from the past, there were about, now at the moment, we have about 23 septic treatment plants in the country, serving more than 21 million people. But and I'm sad to say that most of these septic treatment plants are not working properly, and they are not operated properly. So it has been a problem, because though the septic is taken to the septic treatment plants, they are not treated properly. So with the master plan, we plan to rehabilitate these septic treatment plants and to construct 27 new septic treatment plants in the country to increase the safe sanitation up to 53% by 2030. Actually, so our main intention is to not to construct large scale or sewerage networks covering every small city. Our main consideration is to develop the sanitation sector or the safe sanitation by providing gully bowsers and fecal sludge management treatment plants and decentralized wastewater treatments island-wide. So this is our major goal. With the help of PPTs, we will be able to do it. So to cope up with the UNHC question here, I think all the set data is really important, because with those data, we can get an idea, clear idea where we are and where we are heading. And we know now what are the data available and how to find them. So as it was discussed before, this is the flowchart. This clearly shows what's going on. And in Sri Lanka, we don't have a clear idea on what is the quantities and quality of wastewater generated from runoff of rainwater and agriculture. And other parts like domestic and industrial, we have an idea. So this is the basic guideline actually provided by UNHC. So we'll be following this guideline to analyze our data and the questionnaire. So with this regards to the questionnaire, UNHC questionnaire, there are mainly 3 tables to be filled. Table 4, 5, and 6. So as you can see, I have categorized the lines with similar nature, and it is easy to find these categorized data together. For an example, if you see this green color, if we can find the precise data of other wastewater treatment plants from there, we could get the figures for primary data, primary and secondary, tertiary treatment qualities of wastewater. Likewise, I have categorized this one. So it is easy. If you find the major part from that, we can derive the remaining parts of the questionnaire. So actually, this is the most available data in the country, which is household data. So usually household data is the most frequently available data in our country also, like in every other country. So we could get the number of households in septic tanks and without septic tanks from national census data, and even the reports respective from which reports generated from the local authorities. And according to this data in Sri Lanka, there are about 1.5 million households with septic tanks. And so that is the baseline of how many septic tanks are there. Anyway, now when considering wastewater management households, usually there are 6 categories that we can categorize them to analyze the wastewater, what happens. First one is population connected to sewerage networks, where only primary treatment is available. So for this, we can get the data from National Water Supply and Drainage Board and Municipal Council of Colombo. As I mentioned before, the Colombo has an only primary treatment, and the water after the primary treatment, wastewater is sent to the sea outfall. And the second, so that data we can get the population covered with only primary treatment. And the second one is population connected to sewer network, where there are wastewater treatment plants. So this data also we can get from National Water Supply Board, where we are operating the plants, and even with the municipal councils and Pradesh Sabha locations, because they have a precise data on how many households are connected and what is the population of each house and population coverage. The third part is population living in household schemes, where wastewater treatment plant is available. Usually with this environment acts going on in Sri Lanka, with 2015 and so forth, the blockout lands like housing schemes and condominiums, it is a must to have a separate wastewater treatment system if you don't have a central wastewater treatment in that area. So this data also, the population living in households where wastewater treatment plants are available, we could get the data from the relevant local authorities and even Central Environmental Authority. And there's another part, the population in housing schemes where wastewater treatment plants are not available. Actually, before 2015 and the old housing schemes, they don't have wastewater treatment plants. So there are a considerable number of people living on those areas. So there also we can get what is the number of available people living in those areas. Then the next part is population living in individual households where septic tanks are available. This data, as I mentioned before, we can get from the relevant municipal councils, the local authorities, and from especially from the census data and the reports like Pilisaru report. And the other part is the saddest part, population living in individual households where septic tanks aren't available. Especially, this is a sad scenario, but it is true. There is a considerable amount of population living in Sri Lanka where they don't have septic tanks, especially the low-income population. They don't have septic tanks, and the wastewater from their toilets and all just directly connects to the municipal drainage. So those data also we can get from the municipal data. Then when considering the wastewater treatment plants and industries, actually there are 4 main segments that we can find out data. First one is there are industries located in industrial zones with a centralized wastewater treatment plant. And those industries are located within the industrial zone. There we have a centralized wastewater treatment plant. So these most of the industries have their own wastewater treatment plant, and they are treating it to a certain extent, and they are discharging it to the sewer network, which is again treated to the effluent standard. Then there are some industries located in same industrial zones but there aren't centralized wastewater treatment plants. So that is another scenario. So those things, some plants, some industries have wastewater treatment plants and some don't. The other part is industries connected to sewerage networks, where mostly domestic wastewater is treated, and industries with individual wastewater treatment plants. That means there are industries in the domestic region, like in Kandy, Colombo. The treatment plants are mainly constructed to treat the wastewater from the domestic nature. But as the industries are close to the sewerage network, they have been connected to the sewer network. So that is another scenario. So actually, these three categories, it is easy to get the data from Board of Investments, which is the priority organization for industrial management in Sri Lanka, and Industrial Development Board, IDP of Sri Lanka. So for main three categories, we can get the data. And for the fourth part is the difficult part, how to get data, because industries with individual treatment plants, it is a huge range of industries are there, and we have to get this data. So actually, the best way to get this data is from the Central Environment Authority, because in Sri Lanka, for each province, there is an environment authority for each province. So according to the National Environment Act of Sri Lanka, every industry should be registered and monitored with these environmental authorities. So each and every industry is registered there. So usually the major industries contribute to the wastewater is usually the textile industry, desiccated coconut industry, rice mills, hotels, and especially food manufacturing, rubber manufacturing, likewise. So I have listed the list which contributes more, which generates most of the wastewater in Sri Lanka. So approximately, I think the figure should be really more than that. More than 30 million liters of water is generated, and some are treated in these individual wastewater treatment plants in Sri Lanka. So all the data regarding wastewater generation, treatment methods are available at environment authorities, because every industry should get an environmental protection license from the environment authority. So each year, every industry should renew their license and show what is their plant, what they are doing, what is the water they are using, what is the wastewater amount they are generating. So I think the data is available, because with the reports, they submit their wastewater treatment plant capacities and treat the testing data. So I think with the environment authority, they have the data. So we can get the data from environment authorities with respect to, because each industry is submitting these documents for their environmental protection license. So I hope we can get the data from that also. So those parts, actually, the data is available. We can get easily. The next section is manufacturing part. The wastewater management regarding manufacturing, electricity and power generation, mainly the data could be collected from CEB, means Central Electricity Board of Sri Lanka, because they have a coal plant and diesel plants, apart from hydro plants. So there are a lot of wastewater generating there. So we can get the data from CEB. And then considering water generated in construction work, I think we can get that data also, because when there's a construction site going on, when you have to get the water, that water connection category changes from domestic or industrial to construction. So it is easy to get the data if you find out what is the amount of water which the construction sites have taken. So we can have a percentage and get the amount of wastewater generated from this construction site. So those parts, actually, we have an idea what is the percentage and what is the amount of data available. And the first two lines in the question here, which is agriculture, forestry, and fishing, and mining and quarrying. So this is the part we haven't considered it, because because actually now at the moment we don't have a proper propaganda and a proper plan how to get data from the runoff or agriculture side. But I think it is really important because Sri Lanka is an country with lot of agriculture, and in many places, I mean in almost all of Sri Lanka, we use pesticides, herbicides are used, and there are livestock. So there are wastewater generated in this area. So we can get the water usage and runoff data from irrigation department, and I hope we can desegregate it and collect the data from Central Environment Authority and Marine Environment Protection Authority and GDS, the Geological Survey and Mines Bureau. So with these organizations, I think some of the data may be available, but we can have a discussion and get the data. So after that, after getting all this data, only we can move to the next line. So in the next step, we can analyze the data which we get, and apart from that, we need to collect the data from wastewater monitoring reports from industries and all, and we can fill this step with the data from with the help of the data from the previous slide. And finally, it is sad that there are a lot of point sources, especially non-government organizations, don't have proper wastewater management systems. So this is a really really disappointing situation. Thus, it is essential to identify the point sources. There aren't proper wastewater management systems, such as many of the government hospitals doesn't have proper wastewater management systems, and government authorities, and even the private industries. So we have to visit them and to check what is the amount of water is used, what is the condition of the data. So actually, this is the context of Sri Lanka at the moment with regard to UNSD question here. So I will be happy to answer any question in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Istuti. Thank you very much. So I think that's very nice to hear from you that it is very challenging, especially in your country situation, that you are struggling with this financial crisis. And of course, that's linked to those investment and lacking of funding for monitoring system in your country. And of course, not only your country, my country as well. Then let's continue with another important sessions in the presentation by Mr. Dorai Narayanan, a former head of Asset Management Division in the Water Consortium for Malaysia. But I think he's not that talking only for Malaysia, but he can speak for many other countries as well, as he has an international expert. And he will talk about the data management to support SDG 6.3.1 questionnaire, a perspective from water utilities. So Dorai, please.
Okay, thank you. I need to share my screen.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor, and for this opportunity to talk to all of you. So I have a few slides here. So basically, I'm going to talk about the data management, which is guiding investment in sewerage part. Yeah, so not so much on the sanitation, but it is included because we went past the sanitation stage several decades ago, and we are very much into the sewerage part of it. So the presentation is going to be focused on that, and also my own experience of working with local authorities in the 80s and 90s who are doing the sewerage and sanitation, and then later with Indo Water Consortium, which was the national utility. So I will explain that in a short while. So some of these insights are really from my own perspective of how this data management could be a challenge. So basically, for some background of the country of Malaysia, is not a very big country. It's in Southeast Asia, around 330,000 square kilometers. And our urbanization rate is very high, with about 75% of the country is living in urban areas. We have quite a good affluent country in the sense of the GDP is about 13,000 projected for 2022, 13,000 USD per person. Water supply and sanitation, again, quite good progress made. We have water supply 24/7 for almost 100% of urban population and almost all of rural population as well. As far as sanitation is concerned, sewer population, which means people who are connected to a sewer, which goes to a sewage treatment plant, functioning sewage treatment plant, is more than 70%, considered quite good. Of the remaining, about 20% are using septic tanks. And then there is another 10% using others, which means really substandard septic tanks, or sometimes it could be pit latrines, right? So this is the situation we have in the country. And about 50 years ago, we had a lot of these problems, which are quite common in many other parts of Asia even today. So open defecation, bucket toilets, overflows, and diseases, rivers polluted, and so on. At this time, the local authorities were managing it, and they had quite limited resources, weak management, and even though some legal and regulatory frameworks were available, it was not being enforced or operationalized so effectively. And today, we find that it's a vast difference. We have world-class wastewater treatment infrastructure, very good governance with a Ministry of Water, which takes care of water supply as well as sanitation. We have a central regulator, and we have laws and regulations and rules and so on. And in terms of the institutional aspect, we have the national regulator called the National Water Services Commission, as well as a nationwide, almost nationwide, that's West Malaysia, operator, utility called Indawater, which operates the wastewater system and also provides a desludging of septic tanks, treatment of the sludge and so on. So this has made the sanitation to be pretty good. And many countries find this to be a model for them to replicate in their own countries. So now, briefly, if we look at the journey that Malaysia has undergone, we find there are several phases, and the way it was being measured and the way the investments and the interventions were being done was dependent on the phase of development. So before 1957, that is when Malaysia got independence from the British colonial government. So there was poor sanitation and waterborne diseases, as you saw in the earlier slide. And then the first phase, which was being managed after independence by the local bodies, went on till the 70s and 80s. And here, the local bodies focused on basic sanitation, that is providing people with a toilet, making sure that the waste in the toilet was contained, either in a septic tank or a pit or something. And that was it. And that was the kind of information that was being gathered. And the progress was made towards that. And by the late 80s, this had been achieved in most of the country. And basic sanitation, everyone had a toilet and at least a pit or a septic tank. But they did not really look at other aspects further than that. Right? So then in 1994, they found that this is not good enough. And so they brought in what they call as a federalization and privatization. Here, what happened was the federal government, that is the national government, decided that the local bodies cannot manage this well enough beyond that point. And so they passed a law to transfer this authority for sanitation and sewerage to the central government, right, in phases. And all the local bodies gave up this function and it became a federal function. And at the same time, they privatized this to a private company called Indawater, which I mentioned earlier. It's no longer a private company now, but at that time it was. Then they brought in regulation, which was an economic regulation. And this company was a concession, which had to show some progress. They had measurement performance indicators of coverage in terms of sludge removed, in terms of dislodging, in terms of treatment, in terms of performance and so on. And they had to improve all the infrastructure that was out in the country. So here now the measurements were different, right? They were not talking about toilets anymore. They were talking about compliance. How much of the wastewater was going to the plant and how many of the plant's samples were complying to effluent standards and so on. And how much money people were paying, how many were dislodging, how much of that sludge was being treated. So at this phase, the measurements were different. Again, different problems came. And then in 2008, they are looking at integrated water resources. So they are looking more in terms of how the water resources are being protected. Not only water supply, but also rivers, which are used for recreational purposes and other economic purposes. So they try to have a regulator who is common for water supply and sewerage, so that these two could be integrated. So the focus became slightly different. And today, they are now the strategy, which I'll explain later, is to how to maximize the investment of the money that is available. So the single dollar that you have, where can you put it to get the maximum benefit? And also looking at resource recovery, carbon footprints, looking at greenhouse gases, climate change, all those things. At the same time, trying to make it sustainable. So try to recover as much of the cost as possible so that it can be sustainable in the long run. This was the pre-1994 model where local authorities were providing sanitation and sewerage. And the focus was, as I mentioned, on providing toilets and eliminating ineffective systems. I myself was involved in this program while I was in the local body. And we came up with many methods of identifying within the city where are the areas which are not using effective systems. They use buckets or they had direct discharges, and we mapped them. And we used the powers that were available under the law to enforce regulations requiring these houses to convert to a proper septic tank or a pit latrine. And at the same time, financial incentives were given. They were given no interest loans. They were given technical assistance in the form of standard drawings. And there was a panel of contractors who could be engaged. And this the soft loan could be repaid over a period of 5 years without interest, right? So these were the methods. And then as the data was collected on houses being connected or septic tanks being constructed, the data was updated and the target was met within a year or so in my own city, which was Penang in northern part of Malaysia. But the other things were being neglected. At the same time, septic tank numbers were increasing because developers and other people were building houses, very fast development taking place. They were building a lot of septic tanks and the numbers were increasing. And the quality of the design and construction of these septic tanks was not good. Nobody was controlling that, right? And the sludge was overflowing from the septic tanks and the dislodging was not being done on a scheduled basis. And it was also making the septic tanks ineffective. And whatever sludge was removed was not treated, it was just dumped. So all these things, which were really the focus areas, that's the next areas to focus, were not being measured, right? And then came, okay, this was the kind of things, number of treatment plants. You can see year by year, it seems to be increasing, looks like a good thing. Number of people connected to the sewage treatment plant, again, seems to be increasing, it's a good thing. But what kind of treatment was taking place? How much of that was effectively being treated? That was not being measured. Post-94, this was the kind of governance we had. So we had two ministries. So if I can get, if I can get hold of pointer. Yeah, here. So we have one is a Ministry of Water, under which came the regulator, SPAN. Yeah, SPAN is really the National Water Services Commission. They are the regulator for water and sanitation and sewerage. And they regulate services, technical, economic, the tariff, and so on. And then there is the Ministry of Environment, under which is the Department of Environment. They regulate effluent discharges, right? So now India Water, which is that operator of the public sewerage systems and septic tank systems, are being regulated by both of these regulators, one for services and technical, and economic in terms of the tariffs and cost recovery and so on, and the other for effluent discharges. We also had things like class licensee who operate private facilities, and we had permit holders who are the people doing desludging. So this part of it was outsourced by this company for desludging, construction, and things like that. It was being outsourced to them, and they also being regulated by the regulator. These permit holders are issued the permits by the regulator. At this time, the focus was coverage of sewerage systems, trying to get more bigger cities covered to centralized systems where they were, trying to get more of the new developments to have proper sewerage systems, and trying to get effluent to comply, and trying to get all on-site systems to be dislodged regularly and all sludge to be treated. And then also customer service, and to ensure that customers receive service within a given period of time. So whatever complaints, if there is an issue with the sewer overflowing, or if you're calling for dislodging, then there is a level of service of say 24 hours or 48 hours. Within that, the operator must comply. And this was being monitored by the regulator. So in this phase, these were the kinds of things which were being measured. And this is a picture which was not really used at that time, but many of you would know this to be a SFD or shit flow diagram. It's a very good way of picturing the whole situation. What happens here is that this is here showing the value chain, the so-called containment, which is septic tank or pit or whatever, emptying, dislodging, transporting it by tanker, and then treating, maybe reusing after that. Yeah? And here you have off-site sanitation, which is sewer systems, and you have on-site sanitation and open defecation. So here, how much of off-site sanitation is being properly contained, emptied, treated? That's the green bar that you see here. So you can see that is 25% being properly contained, 16% being emptied, and here I can't see this, maybe 9%, yeah, being treated, right? Whereas there's a leakage here, means that the treatment of this is not being done properly, right? And here, not being contained, 20% going out, 30%, not being delivered to the treatment site. Here on site, similarly, you know, you have the percentages. So this is the 1960s. In Malaysia, this was the situation. And somebody looking at this is able to quickly say that, I think I need to focus on this and this immediately. You know, what are the sewers that are not getting the sewage to the treatment plant? Why? How can I deal with that? And how much of these treatment plants which are not working and not complying, what can I do about that? Of these on-site systems which are not containing and not being emptied, what can I do about that? So this kind of picture is actually coming from data, but it is telling the decision maker where the interventions should happen, right? So now this is the 1960s, and with the data, the planning could be done. And in the 80s, it was like that. You can see the improvement. The red bars have become thinner. The green bars have become broader, right? And then again, from the 80s to today, this is the situation today. So as far as the wastewater offsite is contained, is pretty good. Very small percentage which is not being managed well, about 1%. On-site, there is still some small parts here. And again, now we know we need to focus on this thing, right? And then the future, this is what we plan for the future, right? So this is all coming from data, but it's being pictured, is being shown in such a manner that the decision maker is able to focus investment into the right place to get the right impact. So in terms of a principle, sometimes when you don't have the objectives of what are you trying to achieve, like what we saw in the different phases, the Malaysian sanitation sector was trying to achieve different things in that different phases. And that must be set clearly. And once you set that, and then the performance measurements were there, then you find that the efforts can be coordinated and aligned. And the impact becomes very clear. So you have the clear objectives, and all the efforts by the ground agencies here are all aligned towards that. So this is what I call as a line of sight, which is very important in setting what you want to measure, how you want to measure it, how do you want to define it, and how do you want to use the data. Again, data which is measured is just raw data that must be processed to become relevant information in a form that a decision can be made and action can be taken from that. One point that I would like to make here is my own experience in the local body. We were collecting a lot of data and filling up a lot of forms and sending to so many departments. but no one knew what was happening to these forms. So a lot of these forms, nobody is acting on it. It's just being collected for the sake of being collected, right? So now, one of the important things in this data management thing is that whoever is collecting the data, you must give them ownership of the data. And also you must give them the results of the analysis of their data so that they know that the data they gave has now become this information, which is then leading to the decisions on certain interventions. When they know that, then they pay more attention to the data. Otherwise, you find that there's a lot of garbage in and garbage out kind of thing going on. And the person who's collecting the data has no ownership. He has no interest in seeing that the data quality is good because he's not seeing the end product of the data. So there must be a loop back to at least show that, yes, this is what it is. So if you're comparing different states or different countries by benchmarking from the data, I think that must be fed back to the person who's collecting and supplying the data in the first place. Now, this is something that is going on right now. So we are looking at a kind of a planning approach, which has been based on a policy. And the policy has set out the aspirations of sewerage management for the country. And there they have looked at three particular aspects of making sure that the community is healthy and nuisance free, making sure that the water resources are protected for multiple end use, for drinking, for economic reasons, and for aesthetic reasons, and so on. And then environmental sustainability, which takes care of climate change, carbon, greenhouse gas, and things like that. So these are the three broad things that we are aiming for. And we have come up with many, many indicators for each of these and how the sanitation and sewerage emissions or effluents impact each of these areas in what magnitude. And then using the quantum of each of them in each, we have split the country into about 240 catchment areas. They are based on topography. And within that, using the population and various other criteria, we have ranked them. And this is what it looks like. So we have a list here. This is only a partial list of about 240 catchments. And all the parameters come together to show a risk status. And you can see this is the current risk status. And the future risk status is projected to 2030 and 2040. And you can see some of them are getting a little better because of interventions that are going on. Some are getting worse, right? So the red means it's high risk. This is moderate, and green means it's low risk, medium, yeah, medium. So we have now gone to this. This is a very dynamic model which keeps changing as things change, but it is helping to make the decision of where are you going to make the interventions. So we have plotted that onto the map. This is West Malaysia, and we have got these different colors indicating the different risk levels of different parts of the country. This is where Kuala Lumpur is, and you can see around it is all red. And you can see other places like Penang and Johor, and all the urban areas, you see there's a lot of red and moderate and then green, right? The green areas are mostly unpopulated or low population, low density areas. And then each of these, once you have highlighted this as a high risk area, you can look at something like this, which is for that particular catchment. And within that catchment, you're looking at, again, the high, medium, and low areas. And you know where your interventions should go. So you're now doing a prioritization on a national basis. And within each catchment, you're doing a prioritization. So the money that is available will really go to the place which needs it the most and where it can make the most difference. So this is something that is being done right now. So it may be online in the next year or so. Then from there, you can see that for different types of risk zones, here we are looking at RSTP, means regional sewage treatment facility. And this is for a high risk and medium risk. This is the profile, which is showing the histogram of the current distribution of how many % of the treatment plants in that area in these high risk zones are regional. So you find there are some low, but quite a lot are in this less than 10% thing. Then you set a target from this and say, okay, by 2030 for the high risk, we are going to go to 20 to 50% of them will be regionalized. And by 2040, 30 to. So this is a way from going from this prioritization to the map, to the individual zoom down map, to the target that is set for each zone. And then the interventions of money being allocated by government for whatever work on improving sanitation and sewage will follow what the lead is shown by here. Now coming to the SDG 631, I must say that I don't really have first-hand knowledge of filling this. I think it is being done at a ministry level because this must compile from various sources. But just talking about these two, W4 and W5, which are wastewater generation and treatment and population connected to wastewater treatment. So just looking at those, this is the latest I got from for Malaysia, is about 88%, sort of tallies with the shit flow diagram I showed earlier. One of the possible issues that could be there for people who are doing this data collection and gathering. Number one, I think this has been mentioned by previous speakers, is that there are dispersed and numerous organizations which are involved in this. And this involves coordination between them for them to understand these indicators, understand the definitions behind it, and give the data on a timely basis so that it can be compiled. So this itself is a huge challenge that I can foresee. Number two, the volume generated. There are indicators which are talking about volume of sewage, right? The volume generated per capita varies even within our country, within Malaysia, it varies from city to city. So it will depend on that. This again is dependent on whether grey water is being intercepted into the sewer system or not. In many parts of Malaysia, which are where the sewerage was done recently in the last 20 years or so, sewage is defined as including of grey water. So the volumes tend to be high. And when you supply more water, where Malaysians tend to use a lot of water, the grey water component is the one that increases, not so much the black water, the toilet flushing and so on. They don't flush more often, but they use more water for grey water, which is kitchen, bathroom, washing, laundry, and things like that. Yeah, as I mentioned, grey water and black water differentiation. If your country is only collecting black water into the sewerage system, then you'll be missing out on the grey water. Definition of treatment levels. I think there are some definitions here, primary, secondary, and tertiary, which depends on the percentage reduction of various parameters, pollutant parameters. So I think this is something that's difficult for the person on the ground to really know whether this particular treatment system will reduce how much, you know. And the second thing is also for those treatment plants, there is a design intent, which means, yeah, when I design it, I design it to remove 50%, for example. But in actual performance, because of various other reasons, operating conditions, maybe the operators' competence, operating capabilities, power supply, so many other things, the actual performance could be much less. So they might have a dilemma. Yes, I do have a facility which can remove 50%, but in actual fact, I cannot do that consistently because of various other constraints. So this may be some other factor that impacts it. Sludge production is given in terms of volume of dry solids. So again, it's something that's very difficult. Most of the time, the sludge is produced in treatment facilities as wet sludge, and it may be in a holding tank, and a tanker comes and removes it. And no measurement is being really done for that. If there is a drying bed, usually in my experience, if it is a big treatment facility, maybe there's a possibility of measuring. But otherwise, people are estimating it based on various rule of thumb, right? So you may not get a very good estimate of that. And the dryness is also may not be so accurate. You will get a dried sludge from a drying bed, maybe at 30% solids, you know. 30%, yeah, 30% solids. But to convert that, maybe the competence may not be there for people, right? And finally, we are talking all the time about population. In Malaysia, we are used to the term population equivalent. The reason is that we look at all buildings and all developments, all cities. We convert sewage generation based on this concept of population equivalent. So if it is a residential house, we assume that the residential house has a population equivalent of five people, right? So equivalent to having 5 people at a certain liters per capita of sewage generation. And if it is a commercial, then we have a conversion of, for every 100 square meters of commercial floor space, that is equivalent to 3 populations. So that's called the population equivalent. And we have a table for different types of buildings, how much is the estimated sewage generation. And people are familiar with that. So when we ask about how many population is being served, people tend to get a bit confused with population equivalent. Of course, it can be converted, but you find that in city areas where there are large portions of commercial and industrial area, nobody lives in those areas, but there's sewage being generated. And that's where the population equivalent concept comes in. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop with that. And if there are any questions, I can take that later. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dorai. That's very comprehensive and
thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Capitalized from your rich experience. And then, of course, Malaysians' experience is one of the leading country that successfully comply with these the standards, and also that we should have learned many more from you. So I think that conclude many things about how we can use data and process to the information that drive the proper decision-making processes. Otherwise, if just having, okay, we may feel that it is the wastewater issue, but from where and how to do that? I think the data and monitoring and information, that's very important to use that properly, use that wisely to strategize what should be the investment for these issues. So any questions, any comments, remarks from the audience? I haven't seen any question in the chat box yet. Yep. Okay. So otherwise, I'd like to conclude this session by saying that this is the very interesting session that we have done with several speakers who has experience in managing this kind of water and wastewater issues in developing country, and also that well-developed country like in Malaysia. And then we have learned a lot from the experience. And of course, there would be many approaches, many pavement that we can do more in the futures. I think that this webinar is just a kind of small jigsaw that can help people in the country, in the region, and also responsible ministry, that if we have so many responsibility but no one take actions, it's useless. So that I think that would be the things that we need to do, consolidations of this effort into the way that we can gathering the information and then drive the proper policy and interventions to tackle of this SDG, in particular to SDG 6.3.1. So with that, thank you very much for joining this session. I have Mr. Hendra to conclude this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tamarat, for moderating the sessions. And sitting here for almost 2 hours, I think this opens my mind as well that most of the countries, at least the one that we are presenting today here, is focusing as well on 6.2. I mean, focusing on 6.2 and start to shift a little bit to 6.3 in particular to measure the amount of wastewater safely treated. I think I learned also from Sri Lanka, there is effort to increase the coverage and also how to initiate to measure domestic and industrial wastewater. In one of the slides from Mr. Disanayake, there are many institutions are involved, but I think he showed us whom to talk to and the steps to collect the data, as well as in Nepal. So to conclude, I'd like to take one of the slide content from Mr. Dorai about data, information, decision, and action. And yeah, from what I learned from Nepal and also Sri Lanka, I think we know what it is, what data it is, and where it is located, and how to collect it. And the next action would be how to utilize that data to submit to SDG 6.3.1 questionnaire. Thank you very much for today's participation, and have a good day. Sorry,
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.